Mr. Rob Chen. Deputy President, first of all, I would like to express my deep condolences to those who unfortunately lost their lives in the Wang Fuk Court fire. I also would like to express my condolences to their family members and those affected by the fire. This disaster has really touched the hearts of the people, and we can see the unity of the people after the fire. And we have seen support being provided by the government and different sectors. With the government submitting the motion today, it really shows the government is attaching great importance to post-disaster and rebuilding work. I also appreciate how the motion includes the expression, the idea of reviewing legislation, improving existing systems, and plugging loopholes. So we can see that the government is taking a long-term approach to make sure similar incidents don't happen again. The government has done well in disaster response, but we cannot stop here. To ensure Wang Fuk Court residents can rebuild their lives and homes, and to enhance building safety in general in Hong Kong, I have some suggestions. One, we need to expedite the establishment of policies. We need to have a clear timeline when we're going to have preliminary proposals. Regular reports should be made to the LegCo as well as residents to ensure information transparency and for the residents to have clear expectations. Two, we need to ensure fairness, transparency, and effective use of the support fund. The support fund has amassed a sum of $4.3 billion. It has really shown the care of different sectors of Hong Kong. We should have an independent vetting committee that consists of accountants and resident representatives to regularly vet the accounts of the fund to make sure every penny is used effectively to help affected residents. We need to have preliminary proposals for rehousing and compensation mechanisms, and we need to have fair and transparent rules to prevent any disputes from arising. We need to have a comprehensive review to enhance building safety regulations and legislation. With the tragedy of the Wang Fuk Court, it really is ringing the alarm bell for fire safety of older buildings. We should have a cross-departmental group to look into how we can tackle the issues. We need to really break through the barriers of vested interests, especially for the owners' corporations of older buildings. We should help them with the difficulties they will face in maintenance and fire safety works. We should provide support necessary. We need to make sure we are reviewing existing legislation to make sure there is effective implementation of the government's initiatives. We also need to give the enforcement agencies greater powers to take enforcement action against buildings that have violations. We also need to have a better supervision of construction site safety. The supervisory functions right now are scattered in different government departments. The government should set up a cross-department monitoring platform to plug any loopholes in regulation, to also ensure effective supervision of operations at construction sites to minimize the chance of violations. The Wang Fuk Court fire is a tragedy, Deputy President, but we should make sure to turn grief into strength so that we will be moving forward from this. We need to learn from the experience from the tragedy and put forward systemic reforms, plug the safety loopholes, and build a safer and more livable Hong Kong. Deputy President, I speak in support of the motion.
Mr. Deputy, we're joined by government officials. With a heavy heart, we discuss the recovery efforts of the Tai Po fire. We reflect on the tragedy. The fire took away lives and homes. First, my deepest condolences to the families of the deceased, as well as to all those injured. There were those who went the way of danger to rescue others, and they will always be remembered. The firefighter Ho Wai-ho demonstrated integrity and dedication. He stuck to his post to save lives. I also thank the Disaster Victim Identification Unit of the police for performing the daunting tasks of search and rescue. They showed professionalism. At the scene, there were other support workers working tirelessly day in, day out. They made an enormous contribution to help the residents. And then there were all those care team members, social workers, members of professional bodies, as well as people who volunteered and people who gave to those residents. All that shows community level solidarity. We see the kindness and goodness of the community. I'm fully confident in the recovery and the reconstruction. In the hour of crisis, the government acted swiftly by setting up task forces and offered temporary housing. There was a support fund, there was dedicated manpower to help residents, and that shows the sense of responsibility and sense of mission as well as commitment on the part of the government. We have moved on from emergency support to recovery and prevention. At this juncture, we should focus on 4 areas and we should work together on them. First, continuous support for the traumatized. I'm not just talking about the 5 victims, but also the people who took part in the rescue effort. Let's also pay attention to their emotions and the distress for them. Second, we should push through reforms to crack down on bid rigging. I myself come from Kowloon East. I have been in district work for years. I will have more to say on this in the next motion. Third, let's give a range of options to the 5 victims to rebuild their lives. Fourth, we need transparent and efficient investigations to lay the foundation for long-term stability. The chief executive made some powerful remarks today on holding people accountable, whatever rank, whatever role those people were in. And that should give the residents of Wang Fuk Court confidence. On building management, I thank the Chief Secretary for Administration as well as the Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs and the Secretary for Development. I thank them because for months I have been calling for reforms, and today these officials have given me a positive response. So let's work together to implement those reforms in district as soon as we can. In Kwun Tong, I'm working on building management issues for 5 buildings. I know Ms. Alice Mack has put forward an idea on proxies. Here's a question for everyone to think about. Can we separate the right to attend OC meetings and the right to vote when it comes to proxies? On these points, I will have more to say about them on future occasions as Seoul Summit. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The first motion this year is a sad one. We're discussing the recovery of the Tai Po fire. I start by thanking the SAR government. After the fire, the government acted on issues of food, shelter, and access to money, the government did a good job in offering support. People may not be aware of this. Now, for housing, we got transitional housing, light public housing, youth hostels, and hotels. All those places offered support. At some point, people have to return those units to the hotels. That's a separate issue, but the government stepped in the moment of crisis, and that was good. I have some cases at hand. There are some cases that warrant attention. We visited cremation facilities. We helped out with the identification of human remains. The government acted swiftly, even with identification. I also want to commend the forensic pathologists, because those specialists even told us whether those deceased persons died in pain. The Home and Youth Affairs Bureau also helped out throughout the process. Their staff was present even in funeral parlors. The question for everyone is, if someone else were in the shoes of this SCR government, could they have done a better job? Now, we have to guard against people trying to exploit the crisis to sow discord. On the 27th of November, there were reports of police officers taking down ID numbers of volunteers, and then there was talk about people criticizing the fire services department. And then we also got this joint letter about in situ redevelopment to pressure the government. Some people did not find out what was really the case, and then they just went ahead and signed up for the joint letter. Should that override Hong Kong's overall interests? We should be guarding against some such attempts. And I want to discuss this document. I give this document 9 out of 10. But some residents struggle to fill out the survey. Question 4. Now, if you want a GSH or HOS flat, would you much rather have a flat-for-flat scheme so that you can get a flat at a comparable price, which is a new HOS flat? So there are words like flat-for-flat, in-kind, comparable prices. Residents struggle to make sense of the questions. Of course, people can stick together in hard times, but then people compare themselves with their neighbors. Some people get a bigger flat, slightly bigger flat, and then they're not happy with that. So this kind of question also poses problems for the social workers when it comes to filling out the form. So this survey warrants more attention, because in a few years' time, people will be discussing the rehousing arrangements, and people will say there is something not fair about the rehousing. Now, there are some complicated cases. I've got cases involving imported workers here, some unscrupulous intermediaries ask those imported workers for the $50,000 of relocation grant. So I urge the government to pay attention to such cases, and I hope all residents get appropriate rehousing options. Dr. David Lam, thank you. I support the Chief Secretary for Administration's motion on the Tai Po fire. On the evening of the fire, frontline healthcare professionals went to the scene. The Primary Healthcare Commission played a crucial role. There was also cooperation with doctors in private practice. At every shelter, there was a spot where healthcare professionals provided services. There were also people from the PHC, and there were people from the district health centers and also community pharmacies. The PHC and the community pharmacies helped the fire victims get the drugs they need before their future follow-up consultations. For that, I thank the PHC and also commend the work done by them. Today, our focus has moved on from immediate assistance. We're now talking about recovery and reform. My colleagues have talked about long-term rehousing. For me, I want to talk about healthcare. First, psychological and emotional support. Second, convalescence. I will start with emotional and psychological support. For people, the five victims and their carers, as well as the general public, everyone was left traumatized. People are depressed, they develop anxiety, some develop acute conditions, and some people will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. And that impact will last months or even years, and that will affect people's lives. So we need ample professional support services that will be key to helping people rebuild their lives. The 2025 policy address announced a stepped approach to mental health care involving 9 measures. Those measures are needed now more than ever. I hope the hospital authority and NGOs can move faster with this approach. We need to train talent, we need teams of professionals, and we need protocols for their operation. Convalescence is another point. Now, I used to treat burn victims in the surgery department. I witnessed the long recovery for those victims. They had to go through multiple surgeries, and then they have to go to physiotherapy and occupational therapy. Recovery could take years. For our public hospitals, we offer excellent early care. We're also a leader in rehabilitation technology, but we are short of capacity in community rehabilitation. Our coordination also struggles to keep up with the needs of many patients. Now, for convalescent care, there's community care and medical care. We can do better, because such care now falls under both the Labor and Welfare Bureau and the Health Bureau. We need both community convalescence and the medical care. So let's be forward-looking. I support the Chief Secretary's remarks that we should overcome vested interests through reforms so that Hong Kong is a place where we give people the peace of mind in their lives and in their work. Now I want to turn to workers. Work safety will give people peace of mind. They want pay on time, they need a safe work environment. Workers need to feel safe, they need peace of mind, a stable job, and upward mobility, and a clear career path. That's how we can get young people to join those sectors. I look forward to changes. Thank you.
Mr. Scott Leung. Thank you, Deputy President. I fully support the government's motion on support and rebuilding at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. It was a great blow to those living in the buildings. We need to take care of the residents on several fronts. First, we need to have an accommodation plan. Second, we need to give them more options so that they can choose the best options given their circumstances. 3, we need to make the best use of the support fund and public money to help the residents. And finally, we need to streamline the procedures to avoid burden. I understand the wish of residents who have lived in Wang Fuk Court for several decades and the wish to have their homes rebuilt, but it takes a lot of time. If you look at the Ma Tau Wai Road redevelopments, it took decades. Now, back in 2017, there was a huge fire at Grenfell Tower in London. It took almost a decade for the building to be rebuilt. So I understand the wish of residents to be rehoused in the same districts in Tai Po. I also support the government's proposal to set aside quotas in future HOS exercise for the residents to choose. Now we can adopt a similar arrangement for waiving the premium for green farm secondary market so that affected residents can purchase a flat as soon as possible and start a new life. Now, despite these options, many residents may still be worried about having to move into a smaller flat and having to pay mortgage. Now, we should make reference to the Housing Authority's flexible payment arrangement. Now, besides offering a 70% or 30% discount arrangement for residents, they should also be given discounts to buy subsidized flats. And also there should be a mechanism to temporarily pay the shortfall in the flat's price and allow the residents to pay the government back in the future. This will ensure that public money is spent wisely while providing continuous support for the residents. I've talked to some elderly residents in Wang Fuk Court and they are worried. In view of the increasing housing supply in the public market, we should use public housing resources as a buffer. For those who cannot afford any of the above options, for example, the elderly residents, they should be given a flat in the public housing market or public rental housing estates so that they can retire there. Now, the Housing Authority holds the information on the market's value and also the cost of building Wang Fuk Court. So we need to ascertain the role of the Housing Authority played in the rebuilding process. We need to ensure that all departments are ready to put in the required manpower and financial resources once a plan is finalized. Deputy President, the key to rehousing the residents is to give them hope. I look forward to seeing more options provided by the government so that the residents can choose an option best suits the needs to move beyond the disaster. I believe that all new members in the Electrical will fully support the government in rolling out measures as well as reviewing existing legislation, plugging loopholes and reviewing the mechanism to prevent disasters from happening again so that Hong Kong can continue to be the most livable city and safest city in the world. I so submit. Dr. Junius Ho. Deputy President, I speak in support of the motion moved by the Chief Secretary for Administration. How should we support the residents affected and rebuild their homes after the fire at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po? On this front, I've heard many different views from my colleagues. I fully support them. As the Chief Executive and the Chief Secretary for Administration have said, we need to take those accountable to task. We need to get to the bottom of this. No one who made a mistake should be given a break. The ICAC and the law enforcement agencies should arrest whoever is responsible. That's correct. It's not just in the private sector. We need to review the internal working mechanism inside the government as well. Are we too complacent? This disaster has caused us to face those issues head on. We need to face the flaws seriously and correct them. At the same time, I applaud the government's swift actions after the disaster, especially its care for elderly residents. As my colleagues have said, when one place suffers a misfortune, help comes from all quarters. We have received a lot of support from the country as well. The government has only contributed $300 million into the support fund, but we have $4.3 billion in total. This is great. Under the leadership of the Chief Executive and the Chief Secretary of Administration, this government has done a good job. So I can't say we are proud, but we are happy with your efficiency. But what about the road ahead? What needs changing? First of all, within 12 months, we have to rehouse the 1,900 households who have been affected. I have conducted a preliminary analysis. In a few weeks' time, I will submit my report to the Chief Executive and Chief Secretary. We can't afford dawdling. First and foremost, we need to put a roof on top of the 1,900 households. We need to defer everything and give priority to this group of people. It's not jumping the queue. It's because this extraordinary situation calls for this. Green form, white form, whatever, just give them the priority. And then we can allow for flag exchange. The government must take the lead and be executive-led. If necessary, a dedicated piece of ordinance can be introduced into the electrical to meet the needs of the Wang Fuk Court residents. Housing Bureau, Development Bureau, whichever is responsible, legislate for the swift accommodation of the 1,900 households. Second, community work. We have 13,000 corporate owners and some 24,000 buildings in Hong Kong are already 30 years old. Now, the owners' corporations are like mini governments. They control everything. They control the land, they control the money. Now, the Home Affairs Bureau should supervise them. Now, Miss Alice Mack is my good friend, but I'm praising her not because of our friendship. She has done a good job. But we need to keep a closer eye on the operations of the owners' corporation. We need to help the owners' corporation to comply with the law. Now, mediation, dispute resolution, we need to invoke the power of our justices of the peace. They should be given more work. Thank you. Mr. Eric Yim, Deputy President, this sudden disaster has taken the life of 161 people. It has touched the central government's heart. We need to lay the deceased to rest and help the survivors overcome the grief. But this should also be an motive and impetus for the governments to reform. Now, with the support of the central government and all parts of society, the government has acted swiftly to offer effective reliefs, from emergency reliefs, interim accommodation, to volunteer work and emotional support. Work has been conducted swiftly and orderly. The government has successfully maintained social order and prevents the disaster to spiral into more social chaos. Different sectors of society have been very generous in helping the residents. Now, from Chinese enterprises and other parties in the mainland, some 1.7 million Hong Kong dollars have been raised. It shows that we truly enjoyed a deep tide. Now, the quality of our relief work and also the subsequent law amendments in the aftermath of the fire are also very important. Now, different families affected have different situations in terms of the financial situation and the household. They have different needs. We need to provide them with diversified choice, from property buyback, flag for flag exchange, and in situ redevelopments. We need to make sure that the plans are implemented effectively, and we need to sit down and think how we can prevent similar disasters from happening again. We need to conduct an in-depth review on the existing legislations, especially on tendering, qualification, certification, and also verification of products. We need to implement the comprehensive ban on smoking on construction sites. We also need to implement smart construction sites and high-tech materials, for example, highly fire-retardant materials. We need to step up accountability in construction sites and tackle the issue of bid rigging and using inferior materials in the industry. We need to ensure a healthy, competitive environment. For those businesses which have multiple contraventions, the licenses should be revoked. We need to step up monitoring owners' cooperation as well. We need to establish a whistleblower culture. Once a report has been made, the government should actively follow up on the report. All resources should be given to the Independent Investigation Committee so as to find accountability and get to the bottom of this matter. Deputy President, the glorious history of the Chinese nation has been a history of struggling amidst crisis. Crisis helps forge a nation. Let's rise like phoenix from the fire. It takes time to recover, but with a flexible mindset, we can conduct necessary reform. The government must hold its mission seriously and plug the legal loopholes and help the affected residents to move beyond their grief and rebuild their home. The road is long, but with determination, we can finish it. Let's work together with the government officials. I so submit and support the motion. Thank you.
邱達根議員。
Mr. Duncan Chu. Deputy President, the Wang Fuk Court fire is one of the most serious disasters Hong Kong faced. It has been close to 2 months. I would like to here again express my deep condolences to those who died in the fire and those who are affected. This fire shows that there are some systemic issues with building maintenance and regulation as well as emergency response. There may even be some human-related issues. The government will get to the bottom of this and promote systemic reforms, including making use of innovation and technology to improve existing systems and plug existing loopholes. This is how the government can really answer to the people. Today's motion is about 2 main areas: post-disaster support and systemic reform, and the chief executive talked about how we are going to implement some measures in future, and we will look at how there may be loopholes or human errors in works regulation. There may also be issues with the fundraising of owners corporation and tendering. We should, at the very least, enhance transparency. We need to find out where things went wrong to make sure something like the Wang Fuk Court fire does not happen again. In fact, the day of the fire was the day I was supposed to take part in the election forum. And before I started the forum, I have already heard that there was a fire. After the forum, after reading the different reports, we have immediately suspended electioneering work, and we have then received many calls from those affected, and we started going into emergency response mode. In fact, the INT sector also had a volunteer team. Many of those in the sector took part in the work of the volunteer team to support affected residents. As Professor William Wong said earlier, for the sector, the volunteer team helped the government construct an online supplies donation platform. Actually, for some of the people in charge of mainland companies whom I have only met with once, called me simply to ask me how they could help the affected residents. They pay close attention to the situation in Hong Kong. They very much would want to provide their help to affected residents. And as the chairman of the management committee of Kwai Chung Hospital, I also know of some medical assistance provided to affected residents. I would like to thank those who took part in the work from the INC sector as well as those from Kwai Chung Hospital. I also worked with different government departments, having frequent exchanges. I would like to thank those in the government for providing round-the-clock help to affected residents as well. We had other electrical members talk about problems of how we have an aging population as well as aged buildings. It is time that we do something. We have an issue of aged buildings to deal with, in particular today. And I have had different proposals from the INT sector. In fact, on the 27th of February, a commission, an industry association, and my office will work with the Science Park to hold a building management tech products and solutions briefing. We will have 40-odd tech companies showcase their tech solutions for emergency response and building management. We hope that with this, in the long term, it can provide some ideas for building management and disaster response. I hope that members can have their colleagues attend this event on 27th of January to see what the INT sector can offer for future governance. Thank you. I so submit. Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Deputy President. The Wang Fuk Court fire is the most serious fire in recent years in Hong Kong. Not long after the fire, the government coordinated different government departments to implement a series of emergency support measures to support the affected residents. I very much appreciate that. We also need to find out about the truth and hold those who should be held accountable, including criminal liabilities. We need to have inspections conducted in a targeted manner to prevent similar incidents from happening again. I will talk in particular about 3 areas. 1. providing diversified rehousing options. The affected residents have different circumstances. Providing a single option will not be able to meet the needs of different households. I therefore suggest that the government provide diversified housing options to affected residents so that owners and eligible tenants can select the option right for them. I have 3 proposals in this regard. 1, owners can sell their ownership to the housing authority at a reasonable value, and they can purchase another housing unit, or they can exchange for an existing home ownership scheme flat or a public housing flat, perhaps one close to the Northern Metropolis. For eligible tenants, we can provide a lump sum grant for transitional support. I hope that in the long term, the government can announce a clear timeline for the different rehousing proposals to allay the concerns of affected residents. On enhancing fire prevention mechanism as well as regulation, before the Wang Fuk Court fire, we had many bamboo scaffolding fires. We actually already had a number 3 alarm fire earlier in Central. So this is not a single incident. The government needs to review as soon as possible the existing fire safety regulation regime to see if we have adequate laws for prevention. We need to enhance existing laws as well in relation to implementing a smoking ban in construction sites and increasing the relevant penalties. We also need to enhance publicity and education. On deepening support in terms of mental health and medicine, we have the government providing different mental health and medical support for affected residents, as well as implementing the 1 social worker per household mechanism. I suggest that the government coordinate different institutions and charities as well as NGOs to take a proactive approach to provide regular, long-term emotional, medical, as well as gerontological support to affected residents. We would also like to thank the industrial and commercial sectors, as well as the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and the Association of Banks for implementing emergency support measures to prioritize the handling of submissions by affected residents and providing financial assistance. The government should learn from this experience and drive systemic reforms to prevent tragedies from happening again. I so submit. Mr. Andrew Fan. Thank you, Deputy President. I support the motion proposed by the Chief Secretary. I also support the government's work for post-disaster work in relation to the Wang Fuk Court fire. We have to support the government's work because this is our responsibility. We are now getting to the medium to long-term stage, which can get quite complex. I first would like to thank the citizens of Hong Kong for supporting those in need. We have donated handsomely to support those who are affected. I would also like to praise the efforts of the government, especially the Fire Services Department and the government for setting up 3 task forces. We have really done what President Xi asked for to minimize the losses and help those affected by the fire. As we get into this stage, apart from finding out about the root cause of the fire and holding those who should be held accountable, we also need to provide support to affected residents so that they can plan for their future. I understand that the government has been trying to collect feedback from residents on rehousing options. But apart from just asking questions, I suggest the government provide more information and background to affected residents so that they can make the right choice for themselves. As for concrete rehousing arrangements, I hope the government can take into account the different needs of residents and provide assistance accordingly. For example, to provide low-interest loans to purchase a property in the private market, or for them to be prioritized with the new home ownership scheme flat allocation. We need to understand what they want, but we also need to balance the residents' needs with the impression of society. We need to make sure to prioritize safety of citizens, and the Wang Fuk Court fire shows that we have problems in multiple parts of the chain. We need a systemic reform. The government has set up an independent committee to look into the root cause, but we have to do more, and I have some suggestions. One, we have used some flammable materials in the Wang Fuk Court works projects, such as styrofoam materials. It has caused the rapid spread of the fire. So I agree that in future, whenever there are violations of supply or irregular materials being used, there should be harsher penalties. We have also seen before the fire some construction site workers smoking at the site. We have yet to find out the real cause of the fire, but I think with the smoking ban of a construction sites being a consensus, I think we should take forward the legislation of such ban as soon as possible. Another problem of seen from the fire is that we have all 8 blocks conducting maintenance at the same time. We need to make sure we accommodate for a safe distance to prevent fires in future. We also need to make sure we practice risk management for building maintenance works. We need to account for different potential hazards and make sure we mitigate the relevant risks by prevention and implementing construction safety. Deputy President, I very much agree what the Chief Secretary said in the motion about breaking through barriers of vested interests to build a safer Hong Kong. This goal is in line with what President Xi said in July 2022 about the Central People's Government supporting Hong Kong to take forward reforms and break through barriers of vested interests and unleash the potential of Hong Kong. The Wang Fuk Court fire showcases the problems in building management and work supervision. I very much support the government in taking action to rectify the issues relating to building maintenance and protect citizens. I so submit, speaking in support of the motion, I would like to express my condolences to affected residents again. Thank you.
Mr. Ken Wong. Mr. Deputy, the fire at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po took lives and destroyed families. People lost their homes. They panic. The real challenge lies in the recovery. Immediate accommodation and support were provided, but we also need attention to the ongoing needs of those fire victims. I visited a school affected shortly after we rang in the new year. Students are at a critical stage of their development. The fire took away their textbooks, but the fire also left the students insecure. So we should show our care for the students. Here are my suggestions. First, support for the learning needs of students. After the fire victims had to move to the homes of their relatives, or they had to be accommodated elsewhere. So those students had to commute across districts to go to school, and that's exhausting for the students. So for families with school-age children, we should give them priority in finding accommodation within the district or nearby. And if students have to live in other districts, we should offer transport fare concessions or school buses. Some victims told us, with a new place to stay, their children lack a place where they can concentrate on studies. So let's team up with schools to create study space where students get internet access and access to printers so that those students can catch up with their studies. We should give full support to students for their psychological needs. The impact of the fire will take a longer time to become visible. So for the affected students, we need medium to long-term support schemes. We need ongoing counseling. In the long run, we need more educational psychologists. We need more teachers for students in a school-based setting so that students can access professional psychological support over time. Education on disaster response also matters. The lesson from Wang Fuk Court is that we have to go deeper in how to cope with disasters. Currently, this kind of education is scattered. There were no drills. To prevent the recurrence of such tragedies, we need disaster education so that teachers and students are better prepared. We need more education on fire escape and fire service installations. We need more fire drills at schools. We need drills featuring the actual fire escape route. And we need a system where the fire drills involve schools and the larger community. We need different fire drills in different scenarios so that teachers and students are better prepared and they can better respond to fires. We should use technology for disaster education. Let's learn from the mainland. We can set up bases like what Shanghai has done. They have training bases for public safety. That base offers scenario-based training for young people. In the Shanghai base, they have scenarios for fires and earthquakes so that participants can better respond to disasters. Immersion-based training does a better job than lectures in imparting knowledge about response. We just had a catastrophe, but people can support each other. So let's offer ongoing support for the 5 victims so that they can find hope. I so submit I support the government's motion. Mr. Brave Chan. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I thank the government officials for pulling together in recovery efforts. For this fire, I express my condolences to the families of the deceased. I also pay tribute to the firefighter who fell in the line of duty. We support the motion moved by the Chief Secretary. We recognize the government's effort. President Xi stated the need to put people's lives first. We should keep people safe and protect people's property. The government also works towards this goal. When the fire started, President Xi and the central authorities expressed his condolences and mobilized resources across the country to support Hong Kong. We can feel it. When other places became aware of the news and they saw how we mobilized resources up and down the country to support Hong Kong, they said we did very well in mobilizing the resources, and they were moved. This morning, the chief executive also pledged support for the victims and also a thorough investigation. The chief executive also pledged reform to break down the barriers of vested interests. We also have the support fund. Earlier today, government officials have already elaborated on this, so we want faster, better results. The NTAS and the DAB also helped out by setting up emergency response centers. Some fire victims stayed in hotels, others stayed in youth hostels. That's temporary accommodation. We will need long-term accommodation. We need choices for the fire victims. That's a pivotal part of the effort. So I hope there will be more options for the fire victims. Now I turn to prevention. We need systemic reform. At the first council meeting of the current legislature, we are discussing this matter. For owners' corporations, their members are volunteers. They lack the professional expertise, and then there are interests involved in the maintenance project. So a systemic reform on this front is urgent. For large-scale housing estates, owners' corporations make a difference. Some housing estates lack OCs, but they get by because they have professionals involved, and we can look at their experience. The URA, or Urban Renewal Authority, is a professional body. They can play a part. We go to professionals when we have an issue. Say when we're sick, we go to a doctor. Otherwise, the patient can get duped by people with ulterior motives. Now, for the buildings ordinance, let's do a better job. My next point has to do with cooperation in disaster response in the Greater Bay Area. We already have a framework agreement in place. There are technologies, including those on trial, that we can use. Of course, we don't want another disaster, but when another disaster hits, technology, especially new technologies, can help. From the national games, we can see a case of cooperation in the GBA. In the running events, we could see different places playing their part. We support the government's motion, and let's do better. Ms. Judy Chan. The community was saddened by the fire in Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. The fire took away lives. More than 1,000 households lost their homes. Financial losses aside, those victims are also left psychologically traumatized. We all want those victims to rebuild their lives. We're at the first council meeting for the current Legislative Council. This motion is momentous. It addresses the loopholes in the existing institutions, so I look forward to working closely with the government on the reform. And we should also tell those 5 victims that we take the recovery effort seriously and we're determined to help them rebuild their lives. So on behalf of the New People's Party, I give my support to the Chief Secretary's motion on supporting rebuilding work after the fire. The government launched a series of support schemes after the fire: temporary accommodation, financial assistance, other forms of follow-up. We should recognize such efforts. Fire victims need more than just short-term accommodation. They need long-term solutions. The government did a survey offering a range of options. The government can acquire the titles, or we can do flat-for-flat schemes, or resettlement within Tai Po. We got a full range of options. Top of mind for the fire victims are two things. First, fairness, and second, whether the options meet their needs. Some people worry about living quality. Others worry about the valuation of flats, so they're struggling to choose. Such concerns are genuine. So I urge the government to listen to such views and explain how things work. Earlier today, Ms. Winnie Ho, the Secretary for Housing, mentioned the site on Chung Na Road West. 900 units will be available on that site in 2029. Social workers are already working on the surveys. I hope the government can explain the building plans and the size of the units on Chung Na Road West. Most units in Wang Fuk Court are two-bedroom units. Those building plans are excellent. The units are rectangular. Each unit is roughly 400 to 500 square feet. So when the fire victims make a choice, given the 900 units on Chung Na Road West, they want to know the size and the layout of the future units on Chung Na Road West. We welcome the news about the 900 units that will come on stream soon. But we also have to give the fire victims the information so that they can make a choice. The tragedy has exposed loopholes, and our government will have to show a sense of responsibility. I'm happy to see that the Development Bureau has proposed enhancing the role of the Urban Renewal Authority. The Home and Youth Affairs Bureau will also work on legislation concerning the Buildings Management Ordinance. LegCo will work closely with the government to close those loopholes and offer better safeguards. I so submit.
Mr. Alan Chan. Thank you, Deputy President. I'm very pleased to see that the government has significantly improved its cross-departmental collaborative capability. Thank you, Deputy President. I'm pleased to see that the government has greatly enhanced its cross-departmental coordination capability. Immediate relief plan has been formulated. So I speak in support of the motion moved by the Chief Secretary for Administration to support and rebuild the Wang Fuk Court. After the crisis, we should shift our focus on improving the system. The government needs to maintain a system which can ensure safety while protecting the minority property owners. We need to amend the Buildings Ordinance to establish a risk-based regulatory regime. I agree that we need to enhance the penalties for non-compliance. However, we need to build a safety culture as well. Construction work involves a large number of construction materials. For those materials which may pose fire risk, we need to establish an effective inspection system based on risk, so as to strike a balance between regulation and streamlining the process. The same approach can be adopted to fire services installation. Now, the Fire Services Department has kick-started the IoT Internet of Things Fire Services Installation Scheme by the end of 2019. I think that's a good opportunity for the government to speed up the adoption of fire safety technologies so that Hong Kong citizens feel safe once again to live in high-rise buildings. Third, we need to make a breakthrough to address the information imbalance in owners' cooperation. There should be general terms on the contracts drafted by the government councils so that property owners understand the details, and specific clauses can be drafted by experts so that minority property owners understand where the pitfalls are. 3, we should establish a platform or discussion forum involving both property owners and contractors. Now, the smart tender under the URA should come with a function where shareholders can contribute their views concerning the performances of contractors. Through the app, property owners should be able to have access to the bidding results. They should be able to participate in the discussion. For example, we should learn from the Meituan app where you can rate the restaurants. Similarly, property owners should be able to rate the contractors as well as the performance and overrunning of budget. That will help enhance the transparency on the past performance of contractors. Fourth, we need to tackle bid rigging and enhance deterrence. We should make the threshold for proxy more stringent. For example, only 10% of votes should be cast via proxies. We need to plug the loopholes. Now, the competition ordinance should be elevated to a criminal code. Now, Section 6 of the Anti-Corruption Ordinance should also be adopted to the bidding process of public projects. According to the Competition Commission's analysis, more than 60% of the bids are lower than the normal price range. That gives rise to a lot of issues. Thank you. The time is up. Next, Mr. Nick Chen. Deputy President, I give my deepest condolences to the victims and the families affected by the fire. I also give my gratitude to the frontline workers, including firemen and medical services. I also thank the central governments and different governments in the mainland, as well as different sectors for the support. Now, the government has been very innovative in providing relief work. It shows the government's flexibility and also the government's concern and care for the residents. It also shows the high efficiency of the government. Now, I agree that we need to strike a balance between compassion and reasonableness. On behalf of the legal sector, I support the government's work. In terms of compassion, we need to be human-centric. In terms of reasonableness, we need to be orderly and be compliant with the law and prevent tragedies from happening. First of all, we need to be human-centric. We need to help rebuild families. It all boils down to an orderly accommodation plan with certainty, but we cannot entertain every family. I think the government has been doing a good job already. We need to make the support system transparent. The government's relief plan has struck a balance. Multiple options have been given to residents and provide certainty. Second, we need to uphold procedural justice. We need to address the problems of public safety and different procedures at the same time. We can use mediation to offer an effective way to address disputes and compensation claims to prevent exhaustion of public legal resources. I suggest establishing a dedicated speedy approval scheme. Independent and professional mediators should be assigned to run this fund. Now, according to CAP 652, we should make use of the pool of mediators to handle compensation claims and disputes involving Wang Fuk Court. The government should criminalize the behavior of bid rigging. Now, the competition ordinance categorized bid rigging as a serious behavior. However, the penalty is only removal from the bidding process. That is insufficient. In the UK, there is an imprisonment term for bid riggers. We need to consider making our punishments more stringent. Now, Ms. Alice Mack mentioned the possible amendments to CAP 384 concerning the threshold for voting in proxy and also declaration of interest. I fully agree with these directions. I suggest the government to amend CAP 344 Buildings Management Ordinance, Section 28K and 29A, to clarify the roles of property owners in building management projects, so that the chairman of the owners corporation, who is on a voluntary role, can feel more at ease. Third, we need to prevent disasters from happening again. We need to enhance regulation and execution from a systemic approach. I understand the plights of the residents. I've also visited the residents in Hongshui-Q. Now, I raised the idea of establishing a building management department or building maintenance department. However, having listened to the officials' addresses, I now have a better understanding of the government's position. My original intention was to establish a building maintenance department to ensure that all the relevant rules are implemented and all the responsibilities are being discharged. But I think the government's proposal can achieve the same effect. Now, we have more and more old buildings in Hong Kong. We need to address the issue head on. Once again, I thank the government for their highly efficient work. It demonstrates that officials are working for the benefits of people. They are committed to our cause. I so submit. I support the motion. Mr. Augustine Wong, Deputy President. The fire at Tai Po Wang Fuk Court is a rare number 5 alarm fire. Immediately, the government has rolled out support for the residents and consulted the residents' wish. It shows the government's concern for the residents. We support these efforts. Long-term accommodation is a matter of concern. There are 1,984 households in Wang Fuk Court. It is impossible to achieve a consensus. And the government has put forward its position of its reluctance to rebuild the buildings in situ. I support it. We need to get evidence and then demolish the buildings and rebuild the buildings. It will take a very long time. Resuming the property rights of some 2,000 households is no mean feat. When there are legal disputes, the process will be further lengthened. The government expects that by 2030, only in year 2035, the rebuilt buildings will be be able to take in population, but that is already the optimistic estimation. If there are judicial reviews in the process, the uncertainty will be lengthened. It will also add to the public resources invested in the rebuilding process. Now, there are rumors that private developers may step in and redevelop the Wang Fuk Court. I think that's impossible. There are so many households, and the entire estate is under a single lease. Premium has to be paid before redevelopment. Now, with the unfortunate events, the price in the market would plunge. I don't believe any private developers would be interested in the proposal. Now, many residents have written letters to the government to request in situ redevelopment. I understand their ties with the location. We can foresee that there are going to be a lot of hurdles to overcome in the accommodation process. The government must respect the wishes as well as the rights of the residents. For those who refuse to move away or reject the government's options, the government should offer additional financial subsidies. According to the Hong Kong Institute of Surveyors estimation, the pre-fire market price for a flat in Wang Fuk Court without premium paid was 6,000 and 8,000 for premium paid flats. However, the depreciation rate is 49% for the area. If we repurchase the flags according to that figures, there may be fewer residents who agree to the plan. If you look at the flags price in the Tai Po Center, the price per square foot is between $10,000 to $12,000. Now, for areas in Tung Chung, the price is 6,000 to 7,000 only. So without subsidies, affected residents can only choose to buy second-hand HOS flags. That's not including the relocation cost. So I think we need to have additional subsidies on top of the statutory compensation to effectively help them. However, since it involves public money and the sum is astronomous, there must be sufficient discussion in society before deciding this. In terms of the interim plan, one block of building is not affected by the fire. Even if demolition is the way to go, can the government consider using that remaining block as a temporary accommodation to reduce the relocation cost on residents? Whichever option, it would be difficult. The government must balance different views and strike the right balance between helping the residents and proper use of public money. There must be a consensus. And also, it is an extraordinary circumstance rather than a precedent. I so submit I support the motion.
Mr. Andrew Yao. President, the number 5 allowing fire at Wang Fuk Court and Tai Po claimed 161 lives and destroyed many households. I would first like to express my deep condolences to those affected. I would also like to praise those who took part in the rescue efforts. With the new lexical term, people have great expectations for us, and we of course have to fully support the government's disaster support work, and we need to plug existing loopholes. I would have 4 points to make. 1, there should be close cooperation between the executive and the legislature to plug existing loopholes, as the motion said. I very much support the government's initiative to review the buildings ordinance and other relevant legislation to make sure for large-scale maintenance works, especially for fire safety works, we need to make sure standards are being complied with. Otherwise, works cannot be undertaken. We should also prevent bid rigging from exploiting existing loopholes to take advantage of the people. I also ask the government to implement a ban on smoking. in construction sites. The relevant electrical panels should work with government departments to regularly hear updates on the initiative. We also need to enhance regulation of high-risk works. Right now, some of the building maintenance works are regarded as minor works and do not require prior approval from the government. But then when it involves flammable materials, or if it is something that will alter the structure or affect the fire safety of buildings, prior approval should be required. I also heard the government say the buildings ordinance will be reviewed. I very much support the initiative. I think in future there should be a 3-tier approach to make sure we cover in regulation also the contractors, subcontractors, so as to prevent any unscrupulous individuals from circumventing the statutory requirements and shirking their responsibility. The URA in 2016 launched the Smart Tender initiative to provide third-party professional advice to owners. But the thing is, when an owner's corporation receives 10 odd or even 20 bids, it is very hard for them to deal with the tendering. So we need to have the government set up a platform that is open and transparent, so as to provide references to owners so that they know that they are not being ripped off and they can receive proper legal assistance. The government should also make sure to announce investigation findings as soon as they are available. We need to respect people's wishes in rehousing. The government has been conducting a survey. I think this is a good approach. We want to try to meet most owners, most residents' interests and respect the wishes of certain residents. We need to have a clear timeline so that people will know what to expect and they will not go into an extended wait. The Wang Fuk Court fire is a tragedy, but we also saw unity of the people of Hong Kong. For example, General Chamber of Commerce I represent, we have raised donations amounting to $11 million. It shows that the industrial and commercial sectors of Hong Kong are making contributions to the community. I believe in the government's determination in starting a review of the institution. With the cooperation of the executive and legislature, we should be able to instill confidence in the people of building safety. Thank you. Mr. Michael I. The Wang Fuk Court fire has seen with its aftermath swift action being taken by the government and different sectors. I also participated in the coordination work, including asking the City University of Hong Kong, for example, the Vet Center, to provide free assistance to pets affected by the fire. The group I serve has also set up a dedicated fund and provided logistics support to civic society for them to provide support along with the government's initiatives. We're mostly done with emergency rescue work, but the path of rebuilding, we still have a long way to go. We need to seize the timing and make sure we implement the necessary reforms. First, we need to make sure for rehousing options there is transparency and flexibility, and that there are different options available. There should be cash acquisition or flat for flat, as well as other arrangements available. I hope that the government can make public the survey data of residents' wishes to enhance transparency for policy making and to make sure there is a timeline for each proposal and explain clearly the different pros and cons of different options to residents. We also need to make sure there are rapid rehousing arrangements. We should also incorporate different options such as home ownership scheme or URA flat options, I would be inclined to provide the Chong'a Road West and other new development project options to residents because these will take a shorter time to process. For the options that will take a longer time, the government has to review the arrangements for rent assistance after the end of the 2-year period. According to the Census and Statistics Department's 2021 figures, in the 4,600 residents of Wang Fuk Court, we have over 1,765-year-olds or above. We have 422 of them being 15 years old or below. We have 172 of them being 15 to 24. So we need to provide targeted support in relation to, with reference to the demographics of the estates. For the affected residents, especially the primary 6 and DSE students, we should have a 1:5 or 1:8 ratio to provide tutoring to them. We can also have those studying education, psychology, and social work do some sort of internship by providing support to affected residents. We can also arrange for volunteers to provide visits to elderly persons and accompany them to, say, medical appointments. We also should encourage enterprises to implement flexible working arrangements. We should also have clinical psychologists provide at least 2 years of emotional support for frontline rescue personnel. We need to make sure we incorporate emotional mental health support in our plan for rebuilding people's lives. We have many buildings in Hong Kong built in the 70s and 80s in the last century, so we will soon enter an era where there will be a prevalence of large-scale maintenance works in buildings. Right now, owners' corporations are mainly formed by the general public. They do not have the necessary professional knowledge or experience to make decisions about works projects, so they may be influenced or they may be unknowingly controlled. So we should have the supervision we have in private sector to make sure we have a system that has checks and balances, so make sure there is no overdomination of any particular party. That is also to plug existing loopholes and ensure building safety and protection of owners' interests. We need to make sure we reform our systems so that we can make Hong Kong more resilient and more safe. I so submit. President, Mr. Wu Yin-peng. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the government motion. We lost 161 lives to the Wang Fuk Court fire. Many residents lost their homes. It really pains us all in Hong Kong. The fire may be merciless, but there is always hope of the people. We have the Central People's Government, the HASAR government, different departments, different organizations, different sectors, care teams working together to support the affected residents and provide disaster support. And the first agenda item for the this LegCo term is to help the government support affected residents as well as improving existing systems and plugging loopholes. I very much think this is reasonable, and therefore I support the motion proposed by the Chief Secretary for Administration. I've heard what members say, and I would like to give some of my views as well. We have this being the first motion of this LegCo term because we want to, as soon as possible, provide due support to the affected residents to support them in the rebuilding of their lives. Money is important in this, but then time is also important. In the long term, we do want to provide different options to affected residents. Some are willing to wait for longer, but some want this dealt with as soon as possible. We do not right now have a solution agreed by all. So I think we should at least have some sort of draft and then finalize this draft if we can. I'm not an expert of land law, but I know something about the court procedures of Hong Kong. Hong Kong's laws are very complex, and especially with the ownership of Wang Fuk Court having multiple blocks. With the acquisition of ownership, it can get quite complicated. We also need to consider whether this will be used for common use, and we also need to tackle the valuation issue. Multiple owners are involved. If we can't obtain the consent of certain owners, can we even go with the existing compulsory sale procedures? I believe there can be many legal issues that may arise from this. It will therefore also incur some costs. After complex legal procedures, we may reach a solution, but as I said earlier, time is of the essence. We can't really wait until all ownership issues are resolved before we start rebuilding people's homes. I want to quote some government figures. 40% of the affected residents are 65 years old or above. And in this transitional period, not only will we be spending much public money if we relocate people later, it is unfair to affected residents, especially the older residents. President, we need to cherish time and provide pragmatic solutions to affected residents. We need a shortest time consumed option right now. I think to strike a balance, the Chung Road West option is the right option. I so submit.
Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Madam President. The fire at Wang Fuk Court left the city in grief. People lost their families or homes. I support this motion about support and recovery for Wang Fuk Court. President Xi Jinping attached importance to the fire. The Hong Kong and Macau office also helped out. The community helped out. This showed community-level solidarity. The government in Hong Kong has also set up an independent committee to look into the causes so that we prevent such tragedies from occurring. We also have 3 task forces, each in charge of a different area. One on investigation and regulation, another on emergency support and fundraising, and the final one on emergency accommodation arrangements. The priority should be accommodation, emergency accommodation. We're now working through the social workers to talk to residents about their rehousing preferences. But social workers may not have the full picture of the government thinking in policies. They may not be able to explain everything about the rehousing options, such as building safety, etc., to the fire victims. Social workers work with limited information, and they may give rise to misunderstanding given that limitation. So we should do small groups. Let's have government officials explain the pros and cons of different options to the fire victims. That will work better, and that will help fire victims find the rehousing options that work best for them. Resettling costs public funds, and that means taxpayers pick up the tab. LegCo needs to be involved to monitor the process. I hope the government can make information publicly available on how the resources are spent. Let's learn from the tragedy. Let's channel the grief into motivation for reform, and let's break down the vested interest. That's President Xi's expectation, and that's also the expectation of the community. We should review the matter. We should amend our laws. The fire threw into stark relief the corruption in the sector. The mandatory building inspection scheme means tens of billions of dollars of business every year. Bid rigging is a long-standing problem. We need a systemic reform. We cannot just put on a band-aid. We have to send a clear message. We crack down hard on bid rigging. The chief executive also said, this fire showed from construction to supervision, there were major instances of negligence in the construction sector. A systematic or systemic reform is in order. So we should be working on the buildings management ordinance, and we should be looking at the supervision of building materials. We should amend the construction site safety regulation. And we should also adopt ideas to improve fire safety. For the short term, we have to give the URA or Urban Renewal Authority a bigger role. We need a stepped up version of smart tender. We should look into the track record of contractors, and we should help building owners pick contractors. For the medium to long term, we are getting more and more aged buildings, and we will see tens of billions of dollars that will be spent on building maintenance. And the government should explore setting up a building maintenance authority or expand the functions of the URA. As we strengthen our laws and regulation, the government should strengthen inspections and prosecution so that such tragedies do not happen again. Now, for the construction sector and the property management sector, they should be looking into what they do themselves so that we put in place a regime and a culture that values safety, and that will lay the foundation for sustainable development. I so submit. Mr. Sunny Tan. Thank you, Madam President. We're sad to see what happened in the fire in Tai Po. The textile industry started raising funds to support the fire victims on the evening of the fire. There were discussions in the community to turn Hong Kong into a safer place. I welcome the inclusion of this motion at our first meeting. I want to highlight some issues: falsified reports, patchy quality of scaffolding net, and also management issues with owners' corporations. To address these issues, we have to go beyond just sticking plasters. We need sustainable solutions. We have to improve existing systems. Now, for scaffolding net, the buildings department started work right away. The Secretary for Development has told us that the Construction Industry Council is now doing centralized procurement of net, but that drives up costs. It's hard to wait till enough net for the prices to fall. We previously discussed reducing project costs, and we were told about specific measures such as government procurement of construction materials for adoption across industries. So let's do central procurement and expand the scope. We include more industries, and that will strengthen our bargaining position. That will drive down costs. Contractors and also the government can benefit. We can also work on construction standards. Now, for critical construction materials, let's lay down safety standards. Let's get the government to procure the materials, and we can do audit so that we can ensure more materials are up to standard. On cross-departmental operation, The Ombudsman submitted a report last July, and that report came up with 4 points. We need clearer roles and responsibilities. We have to help departments see the crux of the matter. Departments need to talk to each other. They need to take joint up actions. Departments need to be sharing information and experience with each other. Those points warrant our attention. Now, for repeating issues, we should look into them. We need guidelines. We need to regularize and institutionalize resolution mechanisms to address people's needs. On owners' corporations, those members are average people who are volunteers. They lack the expertise. They have there's little they can do in the face of bid rigging. They are worried about criminal liability, so they simply shy away from serving on OCs. The government has expressed its plan to upgrade building maintenance projects to Class 2 minor works. A look at historical data over time can help. We already have smart tender. Let's mandate the use of smart tender so that we can build up a database. An analysis of the database can identify suspicious tenders, and then we can establish the suspicious cases, and then we remove those contractors from the database. People can simply refer to the database, and then they can choose with peace of mind. As the Ombudsman's report said, we have to identify the crux of the matter. I hope our focused discussion today can drive systemic reform so that we give people greater peace of mind. I so submit.
Professor Alex Fan. Thank you, President. I fully support the government's motion. I grew up in Tai Po and I live in Tai Po. This fire has hurt our people and also the ones living in Tai Po. While it's been some time after the fire, the residents there have not gotten back peace. We're all concerned about how we can help them build their lives. I noticed that some members said the government has to be compassionate. Today I'd like to focus on one area that the government needs to face squarely, that is the rehousing problem. Yesterday, together with 8 district council members from Tai Po district as well as other members from Yau Chim Mong district, we discussed for a long time. And district council members are the ones in the front line. They talk to the local residents every day and they come across different cases. They said that residents face 3 levels of pressure. They lost their homes and they are facing a lot of uncertainties. A lot of local residents told DC members that they hope the government would offer them more options as early as possible. They've lost their homes and they have also lost their sense of security. Local residents would like to know when they can be rehoused and how they can resume to normal lives. The government did a lot to respond to the disaster, and we should give recognition to that. The FSD acted, and the LWB Education Bureau Housing Department, as well as the HAD, also offered their support, covering areas including temporary housing, as well as short-term and medium to long-term accommodation plans. I think the questionnaire was a good start. Through the questionnaire survey, the government could collect feedback from the residents about medium to long-term housing arrangement. I agree that the government should consolidate the data collected by the end of January. Then they can start working on concrete proposals. From the feedback we got, local residents are concerned about the acquisition of property ownership from the government as well as redevelopment of the housing estates. It's not about comparing the different plans, it's about finding the plan that suits the residents most. Some are of the view that if they can get the cash back and they buy a new property, it would be more flexible. However, they are worried that the process would be very lengthy. On the other hand, some residents are of the view that if they can have the property for property plan, it could give them more security and protection, especially for elderly people who are not very familiar with the property market. They would not like to face pressure with renovation or finding another flat. These are all feasible options. The focus is that we have to make sure that they are feasible, we can achieve the goals quickly, and that we can offer options to people. I have the following suggestions. First, the government has to make sure that it offers flexible plans. It should consider the needs of families with different numbers of family members and needs. For larger households, the government can offer larger flats, and for elderly people and those with mobility issues, they could offer flats in locations that are well served by public transportation. Not every affected resident would like to stay in Tai Po, so they would like more options. For example, we could allow them to move to neighboring districts so that families with different needs can have the options. Thirdly, we have to be down to earth. We have to be mindful of the time. Affected residents can not forever stay in interim housing. We have to have a highly efficient mechanism and coordination arrangement to make sure that everything goes efficiently. One disaster is one too many. The Wang Fuk Court fire is a tragedy. I hope that the government could take the opportunity to come up with a comprehensive rehousing plan so that we can learn from it in the future. I so submit. Thank you.
Mr. Lam Wai Kong, President. The Wang Fuk Court fire is one of the most serious fires in Hong Kong. It has claimed a lot of lives. It has resulted in a lot of property damage. To the firefighter who lost his life, to members of the public who were injured in the fire, I'd like to express my deepest sympathy. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to care teams as well as volunteers who went out to help. I recognize the efforts of the administration when it comes to accommodation arrangements, hotels, hostels, transitional housing, housing authority, temporary accommodation, as well as interim arrangements. A range of different initiatives have been put in place, including one social worker per household. At the same time, I acknowledge the efforts of the administration in investigation and law enforcement. The police and ICAC have made arrests. Different departments have worked together to carry out inspections and spot checks. All these show the determination of the administration. I agree with the motion, that is, we need to drive systematic reforms. We need to help the affected residents to rebuild their homes. Affected residents have their own factors at play. They have different concerns. We need to use a flexible approach. We shouldn't use a one-size-fits-all approach. The FTU has collected feedback and views from the affected residents of Wang Fuk Court. We need to respect the wishes of the affected residents. We need to make good use of resources. We also need to disseminate information appropriately when we announce information about rehousing options. Whichever option residents choose, the mental health and settling into the new community need our support. We need to continue to provide targeted support to residents. We need to continue to support them. At the same time, we shouldn't neglect other members of the public who were injured in the fire. The FTU, as well as the trade union of the construction industry, visited the construction workers who perished in the fire. Some construction workers sacrificed their lives. They helped with evacuation, but then in the end they perished in the fire. The families of the perished construction workers suffered from different degrees of psychological trauma. The administration should provide continuous mental counseling, emotional support, and mental health services to ensure support is given to them. We should also make sure compensation is given to construction workers who perished in the fire. This fire is a significant challenge to the building management system and the overall safety of the building management system in Hong Kong. We need to conduct reviews to plug the regulatory loopholes. Meanwhile, alongside implementing reforms by the administration, the government should make sure that it will heed the views of construction workers when it comes to material safety and construction site safety. So policies will be more targeted, effective in the future when they're implemented. Safety must come first. We need to build a more resilient society so that members of the public will have peace of mind as they live in the city. Thank you. I shall submit Mr. Chu Lap Wai. President, I speak in support of the government motion today. Last year, a fire happened in Wang Fuk Court. It claimed a lot of lives. A lot of members of the public lost their families. After the fire, the administration has made all our efforts to put out fire. A fund has been set up to tide residents over this ordeal. I acknowledge the efforts of the administration. I also agree that this motion is discussed at the first meeting of the Council so that we can focus our attention on this matter. We need to help the affected residents to move past this disaster. Questionnaires have been sent to the affected residents to collect their views. We have heard in society views on rehousing by members of the public. Some want in situ rehousing, some want flat-for-flat arrangements. A lot of different factors are at play. We also need to make sure the transitional accommodation arrangements are implemented well to help residents. We need to make good use of the policy of one social worker per household. Social workers should professionally help residents to make the best informed decision. At the same time, it is a race against the clock, so the affected residents can rebuild their homes as soon as possible. This inferno has also laid bare different issues such as regulatory loopholes, as well as building management issues. At present, the Building Management Ordinance empowers the owners and corporation to manage buildings, carry out statutory renovation works, but small owners of the properties may not have the necessary know-how to handle such complicated building works. So, whenever bid rigging happens, some residents may lose their homes. We shouldn't let these disasters happen once again. So in the future, we must carry out reforms. We need to take a holistic approach so residents will have peace of mind. Even if there is renovation in the future, members of the public will also have peace of mind. At the Council, I will review the Building Management Ordinance together with members. We also need the participation of public organizations. Small owners need to foster consensus, but we need professionals to be gatekeepers. We shouldn't leave small owners to fend for themselves. The administration and the legislature should work alongside residents. The construction industry, government departments, and professional bodies will also render assistance. When we have laws, when we have regulation, when we have law enforcement, Definitely, this will go a long way towards enhancing the safety of buildings in Hong Kong. The Chief Secretary for Administration mentioned dismantling the barriers of vested interest. These are very correct. Some secure a consultancy contract at a low cost, but then the project costs surge afterwards. Small owners, in the end, were affected. We need to dismantle these barriers of vested interest. We must eradicate this situation. Apart from contractors and consultancies, we also need to carry out reviews of property management companies. Overall, I support the government motion. I also support the government in its efforts to help affected residents in post-disaster relief. I will support all work of the administration. I will also walk alongside residents to help them rebuild their own homes. I support the motion. Ms. Grace Chan. Thank you, President. First of all, my condolences to those who perished in the fire, as well as the firefighter who lost his life, and social workers, as well as all personnel who render assistance. Now we're moving into the post-disaster relief stage. At present, questionnaires distributed through one social worker per household have reached residents. This is just a starting point. To the affected residents, they want the choices to be certain. They don't want uncertainties. For example, the earliest project, that is Chung Au Road West, wouldn't be commissioned until 2029. There is a window period, so to speak. There is friction between professional judgments and the wishes of residents. The core of reconstruction lies at justice. So we should go beyond mathematics. We should go beyond any proposals. We need to make good use of the fund of $4.3 billion so that they will become rays of hope. They shouldn't be pure figures. Funds shouldn't just be used to fund buyout. We need to go beyond bricks and mortar. We need to provide assistance to the affected residents throughout the entire period. We need to make sure they have sufficient day-to-day support. For example, mental health services, case coordination platform, so that assistance could be provided in a targeted manner. I have the following suggestions to make. I hope that the administration will take them on board. First of all, we need to implement a transparent collaboration mechanism. As for the long-term rehousing options, we need to have representatives from residents, district councillors, professionals. We need to have a formal communication platform. All the technical assessments, financial implications, all these data should be made public. This should be the basis of communication. We need to show more concern for the sandwich class, for the owners who have not yet paid land premiums, or for senior tenants. We need to provide tailor-made policies to different categories of affected residents. We need to help residents to overcome this trauma. Urban renewal should be in the core scopes of the fund. Dedicated funds should be provided to support social redevelopment. Say we need to set up community living rooms in physical units. We need to foster better social cohesion. We need to build a good social network with support. Whoever the residents will be, we need to keep the roots of Tai Po residents in where they come from. We also need to build a collaboration system of post-disaster relief. With this information platform, we need to ensure the effective implementation of the policy of one social worker per household. Otherwise, there will only be more certainties to residents. This fire lays bare the loopholes and deficiencies in society. I thank the leadership of the administration, and the legislature will work together with the administration. We will keep all policies down to earth. We will draw lessons from this disaster. We aren't just aiming to build a new building. We want a system with a human touch. I so submit. Thank you, President.
Mr. Kissenyang. Thank you, President. The Tai Po Wang Fuk Court fire has sparked public concern on building safety and its regulatory mechanism. The blaze has claimed lives. It has also caused huge property losses. It's also a test to the government's emergency response mechanism. The government set up the support fund for Wang Fuk Court fire in Tai Po, and the independent committee has also been set up to look into the cause of the fire as well as why the fire spread so rapidly. This is the first meeting of this term of Legislative Council, and the government has moved this motion on support and relief and rebuilding work after the fire at Wang Fuk Court, so as to support residents in restoring normal lives. And I acknowledge the efforts made by government departments. After the fire happened, government departments as well as many members of the public, shop operators, provided help either in kind or otherwise. Charitable organizations also help provided counseling and various forms of services in the medium to long term. This shows that Hong Kong is a city with warmth, and that all quarters would come forward to provide help when one place suffers misfortune. Earlier, the government issued questionnaires to the affected residents, including multiple options of resettlement, such as repurchasing property rights, flat for flat arrangements, etc. Now, President, I have been following up on the issue of urban renewal in Kowloon City, and I have over 20 years of experience. I understand that for redevelopment, it takes at least 8 years, if not 10 years. And it's really a test to the wisdom of the government, since residents will have to be resettled. They'd like to have a roof over their head as quickly as possible. We also have elderly residents that cannot wait much longer, and I believe that this sentiment is shared by the Wang Fuk Court residents. Well, the government should be as pragmatic as possible. For example, the new project can follow the original design, and that residents should be allowed to choose flats of similar sizes to avoid unfairness. Now, the government also mentioned other resettlement options. For example, for housing society, they have resettlement units, and we can consider making use of these units to resettle residents. And in terms of redeveloping co-op buildings of civil servants, the URA also has a lot of experience. Perhaps you can look into that as well. In terms of waiving the land premium, the government can follow this practice of the URA, and that affected residents will not be required to pay the land premium directly, and that the stamp duty can be waived for these residents should they opt for private housing or HOS. As for flat, a special arrangement should be put in place to allow residents to pick 2 HOS flats subject to a size requirement. This will give more flexibility for residents to select the new HOS flats. I hope that the government will give full consideration of the different needs of families and respect their decisions in providing support for them to start anew. And we also need to learn from this experience of Wang Fuk Court fire. We need to improve the building maintenance regulatory mechanism and put forward systematic reform. The Chief Secretary, in his opening remarks, referred to some new measures. For example, there will be a further amendment to Cap 34 Building Management Ordinance in terms of proxy arrangements. On top of that, the government should also look into developing a mechanism to allow the termination of contracts if something goes wrong, so that there is a way out for residents who might at the moment be stuck in these problematic projects. I support the government motion. Mr. Vincent Chang. Thank you, President. President, I speak in support of today's motion in relation to support and rebuilding work after the fire at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. The fire happened in the end of November, and the whole society was deeply shocked and disheartened. Many residents have been affected, and it's a really complicated task to deal with the relief and rebuilding work, and I'm really grateful to all government departments for their endless efforts in providing support to affected residents, as well as providing, for example, emotional support, as well as accommodation arrangements. And recently we have started to discuss the resettlement options. And my constituency is Kowloon West. I understand that there are projects with scaffolding and the protective nets, and these nets have been taken down to ease the concerns of the community. And I understand that the government has distributed questionnaires about resettlement options. And it's a good idea to hear from the residents. And Mr. Wong, the Deputy FS, also talks about this resettlement option, and I hope that there will be more options for affected residents. For example, in terms of redeveloping Tai Hang site estates, well, we had a lot of ideas, but when it came to implementation, we found lots of obstacles. It was first expected to take 1 or 2 years, but then there were legal challenges and things just dragged on. So I hope that this is one factor that the residents will take into account as they opt for any of the options. Now, this fire also exposed some long-standing problems on building management in Hong Kong. The government should take forward systematic reform to plug gaps and loopholes, and I'm happy to learn that from the Secretary that because of this fire, the government will propose amendments to the Building Management Ordinance, and there will also be strengthened efforts in regulating building maintenance projects. And Ms. Mack, the Secretary, also undertook today to review the Building Management Ordinance to provide more support to the owners' corporations. Now, in Sham Shui Po, Yau Chim Mong, as I said, a lot of owners and OCs have expressed concerns about the possible risks and liabilities that they may incur. And this is not healthy. And that is why, after the fire, I'm happy to see that the government will be proposing amendments to plug gaps, and this can restore confidence among property owners, so that when OCs call for meetings, there will be more protections for the OC members. We also need the support from the law enforcement agencies. Now, as I mentioned, the ICAC arrested 32 persons in a major renovation project in Kwun Tong for corruption, and there were also syndicates involved. Now, according to LegCo information, Between the 5-year period from 2018 to 2022, the ICAC received 31 cases of corruption complaints involving building maintenance and rehabilitation, but only one case resulted in prosecution and conviction. And according to the annual reports of ICAC between 2022 and 2024, in the private sector, on average, there had been daily complaints about corruption in the property management sector. And there were also allegations of collusion between OCs and consultants, contractors. Joint operations were held before to combat bid rigging. But for the figures I just cited, we need to find out whether it has to do with the high threshold of proof or whether this is due to other reasons. Now, I hope that the government will conduct a thorough review and implement reform so that we all have a roof which is safe over our heads. I so submit. Mr. Alvin Lee. Thank you, President. The Tai Po Wang Fuk Court fire went on for over 40 hours, and it's really disheartening for the whole of Hong Kong. It's been 49 days since this major catastrophe. We have mixed feelings. We're all saddened. However, it's time for us to go past the hurdles. And after showing concern and care for the bereaved and the affected, we need to stay united and rebuild our homes. And we also need to learn from this incident. We need to prevent something like this from happening again. I support the government motion. Now, the motion refers to various forms of support in terms of financial assistance, medical, emotional support services, aftermath services, accommodation arrangement, and long-term solution. This is comprehensive. The government should take it forward with full steam. I believe in the coming months, the government will continue to do so. And in a moment, we are going to hear from government officials more specific proposals. I think this is a show of commitment on the part of the government. In terms of post-relief and support work in the short, medium to long term, what is the most important is to show care for the people and address their concerns. We need to calm them, and we need to make sure that they will be resettled and they will have a roof over their head. And this is how the government should care for its people. Now, I have the following suggestions. First, the government should enhance the system of support for the people, and we should continue to take care of those affected by the fire. As mentioned by fellow members here, the Social Welfare Department has this one social worker per household scheme. And social workers play the bridging role. They provide comfort and support for the affected and help them heal. My suggestion is for the Social Welfare Department to continue with this scheme. We should continue to enhance the role of social workers. Social workers help communicate. They also help comfort and support the affected. They are the listeners, and they are also responsible for coordinating resources. It's apparent that this scheme is effective, so it should remain. More resources should be deployed to hire more social workers to help the residents. Now, the support fund should set aside a dedicated sum for this purpose. It should be a standing arrangement so as to reassure the affected. Now, as mentioned by other members, over 50% of the affected are aged 65 or above, or 15 or above, so there will be an urgent need for counseling services. The second suggestion is to provide a professional support platform to help residents help address residents' needs. They face various problems such as compensation and resettlement. Residents will need professional help. The government should take the lead. Different professionals from the legal, engineering, and accountancy sectors should be involved so that residents understand their rights in terms of compensation. My third suggestion is to restore public confidence. Now, this is a major disaster, and the fire was extensively broadcast in the media, and this may draw some unease among the public. That I hope that the independent committee will discuss and publish a new mechanism. We're not only discussing the government motion here, we are also addressing the public's concerns and their hope. I think that for Wang Fuk Court residents who are affected, they would like to have a roof over their head in Hong Kong. I'm happy to learn that the government will hold those accountable. I so submit I support the motion.
Mr. Dennis Leung. President, I speak in support of the government motion on support and rebuilding work after the fire at Wang Fuk Court. The level 5 fire has brought our attention to the building maintenance system in Hong Kong, as well as the design of the local fire safety system, as well as the plans we have to respond to fire and disaster in Hong Kong. We have to comprehensively review the outdated systems and management mechanisms. We also have to address and break down barriers of vested interests. The entire Hong Kong will have to reform and improve the current situation. The most important task is to provide feasible plans for residents to rebuild their homes. However, before that, we have to allow each property owner to be aware of the situation as well as the government's decision. I hope that through the one social worker per household arrangement, the government would disseminate the confidential information to each property owner affected. I believe this arrangement would not impede the criminal investigation conducted by the government, and it will speed up the rebuilding work. I believe that the entire estate cannot be resettled or rehoused, and it is not the decision of just one affected resident. We can adopt a multi-pronged approach. For example, we can make use of white secondary form flats as well as green form subsidized homes as well as a flat-for-flat scheme. If there is a household in which all family members are elderly, I hope the government could give special treatment to them and give them waivers so that they could be rehoused to public housing. I believe that most victims are worried about the property price or the price that would cost the government to acquire their ownership. This has sparked a lot of people's emotions. I hope that there won't be too many discussions at the community level. We should leave it to the government to deal with it. For those who opt for flat-for-flat scheme or secondary white form housing or green form subsidized housing, I hope the government can offer discounts to them so that they could solve their housing problems as early as possible. Also, we have to hold those responsible accountable. I appreciate that the government and law enforcement departments have been working tirelessly and making use of innovative technology. It has also arrested those who are culpable. I agree that the government should acquire all the ownership and that it has assigned a company to deal with the management work. It could save resources, and we can have a more consolidated procedure to deal with the claims and compensation process. We should make sure that each owner is compensated fairly. I think that we need a centralized arrangement. That is, we should have the government deal with the situation. This will help streamline the procedure. I hope the government will, apart from rolling out the one social worker per household arrangement, it would also roll out a one lawyer per household or one doctor per household scheme so that each property owner can have a better understanding of the situation and that they could make the best decision for themselves. I believe that this kind of arrangements would allow the affected to have a better understanding of the situation and make a good decision for themselves. Lastly, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone working for the government, including the frontline civil servants, the firefighters, police officers, as well as healthcare professionals. You are all contributing selflessly to Hong Kong. You're all heroes. We're proud of you. I hope that after the fire, we will all review ourselves. We would adopt preventive measures to ensure our safety so that everybody will be able to live in peace and happiness. I so submit. Thank you. Mr. Chen Pui-leung. Thank you, President. First, I have to declare that I work for the insurer that is involved in the Wang Fuk Court fire. After the fire, we see that people from different sectors have been contributing to Hong Kong and they've been helping each other to help the victims overcome the challenge. The insurance sector has quickly set up a dedicated team and set up hotline services to help the affected residents, and they have also taken the initiative to get hold of the insurance policy holders and streamlined relevant procedures for compensation to relieve the financial burden of the affected. During the 3 weeks after the fire, the insurance sector has successfully contacted a lot of beneficiaries of policyholders, and compensation given has exceeded $257 million, involving 1,038 cases. They are mostly healthcare policies or home policies, and it also involves 149 life insurance policies. This shows that the insurance sector has been helping the affected to overcome the hardship. Also, the insurance sector has donated money to help the affected. It shows that the insurance sector is taking up the corporate responsibility. After the fire, the government has rapidly arranged for the affected residents to move to short-term housing. It has also provided rent subsidies, but these are all transitional arrangements. Rebuilding their lives, I believe, are the common wish of the affected residents. This fire involves a lot of affected households. I support the idea that the government should take the lead to make arrangements for the resettling plan. I also support the one social worker per household scheme that has been collecting feedback from the affected residents through questionnaires. I hope that after considering the feedback, the government would come up with a short-term resettlement plan. The various government departments should enhance speed as well as efficiency in coming up with the proposal. Learning from the Grenfell fire in June 2017, well, after the fire, there was only demolition work in September 2025. The reform on the prosecution system as well as the relevant legal system took a long time. It was a torture for the victims. Behind the scene, there were problems that we have to deal with about costs and various issues. I suggested the government set up dedicated bodies and consider acquiring the ownership from all property owners of the Wang Fuk Court and deal with the complicated insurance compensation mechanism by streamlining the process. In terms of funds, there are currently $4.3 billion under the support fund. $1.2 billion have been spent on the assistance measures. It is believed that there are an outstanding of some $2 billion. Well, it will cost a lot for insurance compensation, and the government should therefore take the lead to be the coordinator. It should consider making low-risk and reliable investments for funds that do not have to be used now to help with the resettlement of affected residents. It's been a month since the fire. the scar and the harm left may stay for a long time. I hope the government will provide mental support and regular support, counseling support for the victims. We have to transform our grief into power. We have to come up with a reform to prevent the same kind of tragedy from happening. We should help the affected rebuild their lives. I so submit. I support the government motion. Ms. Michelle Tang. President, I support the CS's motion on support and rebuilding work after the fire at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. The fire was merciless, but there is love in the community. After the fire, the SAR government responded rapidly with the support of the central government and all sectors of Hong Kong. The chief executive, Mr. John Lee, activated the mobilization mechanism to help with the disaster relief and provide temporary housing for the affected residents. The government also disbursed living allowances as well as cash handouts. It has also launched the one social worker per household scheme. It shows that the government is willing to shoulder the responsibility and is capable of being the coordinator. It deserves our recognition. The tragedy at Wang Fuk Court pushes us to reflect on our own responsibilities. Even with the fire, the 8th electrical election was conducted smoothly. This shows our great resilience, and it also shows that citizens really hope the government would help the affected residents rebuild their lives as early as possible. Regarding funding proposals and legislative amendments, we have to stay professional. We have to enhance the interaction between the executive and the legislature to make sure that each penny of the public money is used effectively and that we can effectively respond to citizens' aspirations. I know some people who are affected by the fire and they have been staying in their friends' homes. After they have lost their lives, they still hold hopes because they believe that the government and our society can help them. When I think of them, I feel that the government has to keep improving its support work. It should cover short, medium, and long-term support. It should also balance law, reason, and compassion and adopt a multi-pronged approach in terms of its resettlement plan. The government conducted a questionnaire survey. I hope that there can be a consultation after the questionnaire survey and that household visits should be conducted so that the government can respond to the residents' needs. This fire shows loopholes in building maintenance mechanism as well as tendering mechanism. Many people in the engineering sector are shocked. A small group of black sheep have hurt a lot of people. I hope the government can face this problem squarely and tackle bid rigging problems. I suggest that the Competition Commission and the ICAC be invited to take part in this so that from a professional perspective, they can combat bid rigging and break down barriers of vested interests. I understand that the SAR government has already been reviewing the building maintenance system. This includes enhancing the thresholds for contractors to take up projects and improving the voting system to make sure that there is a third-party monitoring of the maintenance projects. We have to enhance the governance of owners' corporations as well. On the other hand, while we try to plug loopholes, we also have to ensure that the relevant professional service sector can continue to operate smoothly. We should not greatly enhance compliance costs. This is because at the end of the day, the compliance costs will have to be shouldered by our citizens. I hope that the government will work with all sectors of our society to help rebuild the lives of the victims and that we can together create a more livable Hong Kong. I so submit. Thank you.
Mr. Wei Wang. Thank you, President. I thank the Central People's Government for their importance attached to the fire. I also thank the administration for their swift actions. Different departments were coordinated to provide a range of support services and post-disaster relief services. The efforts of the administration deserve our recognition. On the evening of the fire, I worked together with the trade unions and we saw an outpouring of donations. A firefighter even perished in a fire. I express my gratitude to firefighters as well as other personnel who render assistance on the site. I also extend my condolences to the bereaved families. Questionnaires were sent to the affected residents to collect their views. I agree with the proposals floated by the government. I represent the industrial sector. I champion the development of information technology. We need to show a human touch, and we also need to incorporate the mindset of the industrial sector in the policies. We need to go beyond bricks and mortar. We need to promote the modernization of city governance in Hong Kong. We need to take into account the feelings of the affected residents. We need to provide long-term rehousing arrangements for the affected residents. I believe we need to compress the timeline of different policies in order to shorten the agonizing wait of residents. It takes decades or years to see new housing proposals. We need to provide different targeted support, such as technology support to senior citizens. Members of the public should know better the updates of the works. We need to make sure flat-for-flat arrangements come with a human touch. Some owners are worried that there may be downsizing for flat-for-flat arrangements. We need to build a database of HOS flats, GSH, and so on. We need to help the affected residents to choose appropriate flats. We need to show our human touch and human care with technologies. This is exactly how we can enhance the well-being of the affected residents. On bid rigging, it is not enough just to heighten punishments. We need to move faster when it comes to law enforcement and evidence collection. We need to build a database regarding building maintenance and management. We need to fulfill privacy ordinance. We need to provide cross-reference between contractors and owners' cooperation. In the event of any irregularities, there should be alerts. The government should also harness technologies to reduce the time taken to collect evidence. Industrial upgrading is a concern for us. I suggest that the industry and universities should build a system of swift response focusing on the high-intensity building environments in Hong Kong. We also need to make good use of the Internet of Things system, such as sensors, water pressure, temperature system. We need to nip incidents in the bud. We also need to break departmental silos. We need to make good use of the mindset of Industry 4.0. We need to build a collaborative platform. We need to put people first so that our policies will stay down to earth. Thank you. I so submit. Professor Priscilla Leung. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the motion on disaster relief and rebuilding efforts for the Wang Fuk Court fire. In the 90s, I lived in Wang Fuk Court. It was actually my first flat ever. I personally know a lot of residents in Wang Fuk Court. My heart sank when I saw the fire that raged on for 3 days. A lot of minority owners in Wang Fuk Court got their first flat with a lot of difficulties. They worked very hard for it. 3 days after the fire, on the morning of the day, I provided 16 views of mine to the government and the Central People's Government. First, on insurance. Can residents get full compensation? I thank Taiping Insurance for making their stance clear. They will do their level best to offer compensation. However, to minority owners, they may be dealing with international insurance companies as well as a large team of lawyers. Can they secure full compensation? We know very well that some owners may not get full compensation. I hope that the government can step in. In addition to mediation, insurance companies should fulfill corporate responsibility. We shouldn't rub salt into the wound of residents. There are a total of 1,984 households, about 4 billion to 7 billion of mortgage payments. So a delay of half a year doesn't help a lot. Owners may lose their property titles as well. That's why I support Deputy Financial Secretary Mr. Michael Wong for the option of government acquisition of property titles. The pre-fire market price should be used to buy back the properties. The second option is flat-for-flat arrangements. At least residents will get a flat after they have chosen this arrangement. Some of them are middle class. They probably prefer other flats than interim rehousing. Actually, some residents don't want to live in the area. They don't want to be rehoused in Tai Po. And I also suggest that the Chinachem funds should be invited to take part. I thank the HYAB for setting aside $100 million, but it is just not sufficient. We need clinical psychologists and clinical therapists. Firefighters want this service, and for the Grenfell Tower fire in London, some suicidal cases happened 1 year after the fire. Social welfare workers are different from clinical psychologists. I suggest the disbursement of $20 million, or we may disburse $50 million if possible. We need a clinical psychologist for all households, for all age brackets. All of them need the help of clinical psychologists. I also thank the HIAB for applying to dissolve the Management Committee of Wang Fuk Court at the Lands Tribunal. The chairman of the Owners Corporation was arrested. Regarding CAP 344, in 2013 and in 2016, I moved 2 motions. I touched on exactly the same issue. The management of Owners Corporation remains the pain of Hong Kong, and we're going to delve into it tomorrow. Last of all, I support the establishment of an independent committee, but we need to pursue accountability to the fullest extent. We need to get to the very bottom of the matter. We need to thank firefighters, ambulance men, as well as the affected residents. They sacrificed themselves to help their neighbors. All these show the Lion Rock spirit. The whole society should show our love and kindness to them. We need to help them to get back on their feet. Thank you. I so submit. Mr. Adrian Ho. Thank you, President. I thank the CS for moving this motion so we can focus our attention on discussing disaster relief and rebuilding efforts of the Wang Fuk Court fire. We stood in solidarity in the face of adversity. All these show our mutual aid. In the middle of last month, we met with the HYAB and the Development Bureau. I thank Mr. Michael Wong, Deputy Financial Secretary, that we need to provide flexible choices for the affected residents. Different factors would be taken into account, including the state of the burnt towers as well as the wishes of the affected residents. Of course, the background of affected residents varies from one to another. There are different kinds of units. The level of damage is different. This is exactly why we need to provide a range of support measures. We need to implement extraordinary measures in this hard time. We need to stay highly efficient and effective. We need to ensure public funds are used well. The administration has sent questionnaires to the affected residents of Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. Different long-term rehousing options are given to residents. Consultation is being conducted. I'd like to emphasize that we need to move faster to provide rehousing options for residents in Wang Fuk Court. This is also our common goal for Hong Kong. If we can realize this goal, the affected residents will be able to settle into their new living environment as soon as possible. We want them to get back on their feet as soon as possible, so we can solve their housing issue once and for all. I understand some residents have been living in Tai Po for a long time. They have developed deep affection for Tai Po. Some of their children are studying in Tai Po as well. That's why they prefer staying in Tai Po. So in situ redevelopment or rehousing may be more in tune with their needs. As I understand, a spade-ready site in Chung Au Road West is considered appropriate. In about 3 years' time, that could be the first population intake. This site is close to Tai Po city center, and this will reduce the possible impact on the affected residents. If this proposal is supported by the majority of residents, I hope that the government could work faster so the residents can move into their new homes as soon as possible. However, some residents prefer living in a new district. For the flat arrangements proposed by the government, the affected residents can exchange for an HOS flat of similar price in any area. I hope there will be faster procedures. We need to put the goal of helping residents to get a new home first. We want them to get back on their feet as soon as possible. The government should enhance cross-departmental collaboration and assistance, and this should be made the number one task of the administration. I support the government's work, and I will also work together with the government. I hope efficiency can be enhanced, and I also hope resources will be put to good use so that the affected residents will be rehoused as soon as possible. I hope different quarters of the community and the government will also be brought into the fold to help members of the public, the affected residents, to get back on their feet. Thank you.
Ms. Vivian Kong. President, Wang Fuk Court fire hurt everyone in Hong Kong. We're all saddened, and the affected residents have the right to receive support from the government. The government, meanwhile, took action immediately and provided the necessary support to Wang Fuk Court residents. There have also been selfless donations from across different sectors. I'm also grateful to the tourism sector for responding to the government's call in allowing residents to stay in youth hostels and hotel rooms so as to address their accommodation needs. Some tour coaches also formed a fleet immediately to provide free shuttle transport for affected residents to and from their temporary shelter. Even airline companies and other travel agents made donations. Now, we must look into long-term proposals to help restore the lives of the affected. Many residents have lost their loved ones in the fire. They also suffered from property losses and emotional fatigue. They're in the plight. Now, I have 3 suggestions. First, the government should continue with the short to medium term work, and that cash subsidies and other forms of allowances should be distributed in time to meet the basic needs of affected residents. The government and other relevant organizations should continue to provide support, and the relevant support policies should be adjusted flexibly to ensure that the affected residents' urgent needs are met. The next suggestion is about the long-term resettlement options. The government recently distributed questionnaires to residents, which includes multiple options. Now, there should be enhanced transparency in collecting views from residents. The third point is to provide more emotional support as well as other forms of support to meet the healthcare needs of residents. I am particularly concerned about the trauma suffered by affected residents. I think targeted assistance should be given to them because the post-traumatic disorder might not happen until months or even years later, as in the case of a disaster like this. The government can work with social organizations to provide counseling and other forms of treatment. More activities can be organized. The residents can be invited to take part in them so that they can get over the grief as quickly as possible. Now, the chief executive has ordered the establishment of an independent committee so that we can find out the cause of the fire and the truth of the matter in an impartial and fair manner. I am fully in support of the government in taking forward systematic reform and review. We need to plug gaps and loopholes and improve the regulatory system to prevent such an incident from happening again. I support the support and rebuilding work of the government. Mr. Jonathan Lamport. President, I speak in support of the motion moved by the Chief Secretary for Administration on support and rebuilding work after the fire at Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po. Now, the fire has deeply affected everyone in Hong Kong. We're all saddened by this experience. As a member of the business sector, I, along with my sector and the BPA, have done our very best in helping the affected residents. We need to stay united in taking forward restoration so as to allow residents to return to their normal lives. Now, first of all, I support the government in dishing out questionnaires to collect views from affected residents. I think that we need to go by the 4 principles in whichever option we go for. There should be high transparency, high efficiency. We should also make sure that it's cost effective and that the parties concerned can be socially responsible. As mentioned, there are different options for affected residents to consider. They have different needs. A multi-pronged approach should be taken. Now, there are different options such as flat for flat or repurchasing the ownership. We should allow owners to have as many options to choose from as possible. As for on-site reconstruction, the government has explained why this is difficult and not pragmatic. Now, I think the government should give us more details so that we can all make informed choices. In terms of buyback option, according to the URA's experience, there will be disputes when it comes to the acquisition price. The government should consider engaging an independent third party in the assessment and valuation process. There should also be efforts to make sure that there is information symmetry. Now, some of the owners have not paid the premium, and they may not have the right to purchase HOS in the future. Now, as for flat option, in order to avoid disputes arising from owners of bigger flat going for smaller flats, the price should be based on the size of the unit, and there should be flexibility in terms of policy formulation. Now, the government is responsible for providing professional support in the face of complex resettlement options. A professional advisory window should be provided for the affected residents to get hold of the necessary information, and there should be collaboration with professionals such as lawyers and surveyors. In terms of the one social worker per household, we need to acknowledge the social workers' efforts. In the long term, the residents will continue to need support, especially emotional support. Some residents are in their senior years. They may suffer from PTSD without knowing it, and they may not know where to turn to help. There is the need to follow up on these cases in the long term. To prevent such a misfortune from happening again, we need to plug loopholes and review the system. And in the long term, the government should establish a system of disaster management. The government has acted swiftly in responding to this fire, but in the future there will be bigger challenges such as resettlement and resource allocation. We need to rely on the government's wisdom, and on behalf of the business sector, I support the motion and be happy to provide more support. Mr. Lau Ka-keung. We're deeply saddened by the Wang Fuk Court fire. After the blaze happened, the chief executive immediately coordinated bureaus and departments. 3 task forces have been set up. They are the Task Force on Investigation and Regulation, another one on emergency support and fundraising, as well as emergency accommodation to provide support for affected residents. The government also set up the support fund for Wang Fuk Court in Tai Po to dish out support for affected residents. According to the latest information, the balance of this fund now stands at $4.3 billion. About 11 support measures have been rolled out. The government has put people first in the post-relief work. Various organizations, companies, and members of the public have also provided support and donations in cash or in kind. Some shop operators even provided residents with necessities, leaving their businesses aside. This is truly the Lion Rock spirit, as aid comes forward from all quarters. Now, the government should take forward a systematic reform to prevent the recurrence of such a tragedy. Now, the chief executive has already made a direction, and that we should have regard to the sentiment and the wish of affected residents. Resources should be deployed to help rebuild the homes of the affected and help them come over their grief. There should be multiple options for affected residents, including, for example, buying back the properties from on the part of the government, so that with the cash offer, residents will be able to choose their new home. Another option is to make use of the Chong'a Road West project. The earliest intake will happen in 2029, and that priority can be given to the affected residents. The third option is to give priority to the affected residents in HOS allocation. Now, for some reason, psychological or otherwise, some residents may not wish to live in Tai Po again, and we have different options, such as the GSH project, which will receive intake in September 2026 in Kowloon Bay, and also another in Kai Tak. And that we should consider allowing affected residents to receive better elderly services, such as taking part in the reverse mortgage program. Now, Wang Fuk Court was not harmed in the fire, but residents may likewise be affected psychologically. They also need help. The government should take this into account and include them in the resettlement consideration. The fifth point is that in terms of on-site reconstruction, there are technical difficulties and other emotional hurdles. It will take a longer time as well. Now, residents would like to return to their normal lives. They need a roof over their head. We need the government to provide rental subsidies. I hope the government can come up with the best option as quickly as possible. As mentioned by the chief executive, this fire has exposed loopholes and flaws in the regulatory system on building maintenance and work supervision. I hope that the independent committee will review and publish the findings as quickly as possible so that we can translate words into action and build a safer and better home for Hong Kong. I support the motion.
主席。
Mr. Chow Siu-chung, Deputy President, after the fire, the government responded rapidly. It has set up task forces to deal with emergency support and fundraising. It has worked with different sectors of our society so that our resources have been distributed to those in need in a targeted and precise manner. Victims got short-term support in terms of supplies as well as mental relief. In the medium term, the government disburses 2 years of rental subsidies to those affected. According to the government, after the subsidies have been disbursed or the 2-year period has expired, it may consider continuing to disburse subsidies to those affected. I am glad to see that the government has been acting flexibly to send warmth to the victims. In terms of long-term plan, I appreciate that the government has proposed multiple options for victims to respond to the victims' needs. While we strive to support the victims, we also have to focus on how we can ensure construction site safety to prevent the same kind of tragedy from happening. Some contractors used unqualified nettings, and according to the government as well as the code of practice, the nettings have to be inspected before they are used. Scaffolding is part of the works platform. If it is burned in a fire, the melting drops it caused may help spread the fire. The government made an announcement that is, there needs to be fire resistance components in the toll board. I appreciate these moves. Courts, when dealing with cases involving construction site safety, it usually reviews whether the relevant industrial business legislations are complied with. According to the Development Bureau or the Housing Department, the relevant practice note will become statutory requirements. The LWB may follow suit, and include the material requirement into the relevant practice note. We need to plug the loopholes, but the government must be more forward-looking and identify any high-risk materials used in the external walls of buildings. It should include these materials into the relevant list for inspection. I support the Development Bureau in adopting the risk-based approach and adopt a more stringent material regulation framework. Reform is only our first step. The government must step up law enforcement actions and inspections. Take scaffolding nets as an example. In the past, government officers could have checked the authenticity of the relevant certificates or the scaffolding netting. However, in the previous inspections or patrols, the relevant government officers did not notice problems concerning styrofoam boards or the ceiling of windows. And so no deterrent effect could be created. To enhance effectiveness, the government could consider setting up cross-departmental teams for inspections to avoid any blind spots. There should also be flow of information between departments. We need a risk-based approach to ensure that the monitoring mechanism in place is effective, which can ensure public safety. I so submit. I support the motion. Thank you. Mr. Wang Kit. Deputy President, the Chief Secretary moved the motion on support and rebuilding work after the fire at Wang Fuk Court. I support the motion, and I would like to extend my deepest condolences to the victims of the fire. There has been rapid cross-departmental collaboration among government departments. Social workers as well as district care team members have also brought warmth to the affected. I appreciate their efforts. The victims did not only lose their properties, we also have to care for their mental health, and this requires long-term effort. My team and I are willing to listen to the victims in the front line, and I would like to propose the following suggestions in hopes that the support system can be more comprehensive. First, the government must step up publicity. It should make use of technology to break data silos. The government should also make use of AI and the one social worker per household scheme to support the affected residents. Well, the government has already been doing this. It requires the collaboration and support of different social welfare organizations and government departments. Through audio message, the affected can get customized support. However, some of the donation items have not been registered under this system, and it runs on a first-come, first-served basis. So some affected residents miss out on the chance to get the resources they need, and this is like rubbing salt into their wounds. I hope the government can step up dissemination of information and through a centralized system send out information about the outstanding or remaining balance of these donation funds so that the resources and donation could be dispersed to those in need in a precise manner. Secondly, I hope that there could be strengthened education for the district care team members in relation to fire safety. This fire has sparked our concern about fire safety. We have many old buildings in Hong Kong with a lot of elderly people living inside them. The government said it would come up with new guidelines and step up fire drills, and that it will regularly review the fire safety devices and equipment in buildings. I support this scheme. At the same time, the government must strengthen the role of district care teams so that district care team members can conduct households to educate elderly people about potential fire danger at home and enhance the knowledge of fire safety systems. Thirdly, we need to enhance the governance of owners' corporation, and we need to break down barriers of invested interests. Owners' corporations often lack the knowledge about building maintenance projects, and they're also on the weak side, and therefore the black sheep or the ill-intended can take the opportunity to read them off. I hope the government can provide free or subsidized professional consultation support to owners' corporation. At the same time, we need a database that covers reference prices for maintenance projects. Thirdly, we have to enhance the prevention of bribery ordinance so that we can penalize the offenders to ensure justice. Rebuilding the lives of the affected residents is not about providing them with supplies. We also have to build a confidence network. We hope that more support could be provided by the government and that the government would demonstrate its confidence to take forward reform. It should make use of technology to deepen reform and education, as well as to plug loopholes. It is only by doing so, then we can transform the care and love into a sustainable system so that each household can rebuild their lives and embrace a new chapter. Thank you. Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you, Deputy President. I fully support the government motion. The merciless fire has claimed the properties and savings of the affected residents, and this is heartbreaking. I support the government in offering support in rebuilding the lives of the affected, and this covers comprehensive investigation as well as reform. All these missions will have to be taken forward to help the affected residents overcome the hardship. I think the government has already proposed a number of long-term settlement plans, and by conducting questionnaire surveys, it can collect feedback from the residents, and at the same time, it is offering a reference price per square for the acquisition. I think that this is a responsible attitude, and this can respond to the victims' needs. I hope the government can offer a more diverse range of proposals. For example, the Chung Ah West site could be used for rehousing the affected residents. I hope the government can roll out flat-for-flat schemes for the victims. I hope the victims could be given options. This tragedy does not only lead to questions about rehousing, it has also unveiled loopholes in our building maintenance system. So we need to take forward reform as soon as possible. Property owners chip out money for building maintenance. However, this is a tragedy, and we have to remember this. I have talked to people from the building maintenance sector as well as the construction work sector, and they told me that there is a monitoring system in the mainland. We can make use of an independent monitor. We can assign an independent monitor for each project. Say a lift has to be repaired, and there can be an independent monitor for this repair project, so that we can prevent any small circle operations. And this kind of monitor or operators, or supervisors, they work independently, and they switch to different roles every 3 months. And there are no vested interests in them. And this is to ensure objectivity or objective supervision. I suggest that the government learn from the mainland model to see how we can introduce the same mechanism into Hong Kong. This kind of maintenance works can affect thousands of residents. Through a strengthened third-party independent monitoring mechanism, we can plug the loopholes and protect the savings of minority owners. Under the current system, for large-scale construction works, non-compliant workers, they have to have the licenses revoked and they have to face prosecution. In the past, some middle-ranking managers were not willing to take up this kind of responsibilities. They were not willing to even get a license, even if their bosses asked them to do so. And they unwillingly try to get a license and they end up failing the exams. And I think this is a vicious cycle and this leads to a brain drain in the market. I think by introducing this kind of supervision system, we can divide the roles and responsibilities clearly and help relieve the pressure of the members of the sector. Well, this tragedy and a lesson we have learned, we have to remember it and we have to take this opportunity to plug the loopholes that have existed for years. We need to introduce an independent and separate supervision system to truly protect our victims and to truly prevent the same kind of tragedy from happening again, so that all households in Hong Kong can live with greater peace of mind. Lastly, I thank the government as well as the relevant organizations for their support. I support the motion.
Miss Elizabeth Court.